All right, we're ready to put some pieces together here. We've learned a little bit about individual neurons and how they operate, as well as the fact that the brain itself has different regions that perform different functions. So we're going to see if we can understand that aspect of the brain map that we looked at earlier. For example, the back of the brain we know is a visual area. Well, why is it a visual area? Well, this diagram can help us understand that. Here we have a diagram of the eye. So this is supposed to be the eye, and we know that's one of our sensory organs. There's the lens right there. Light comes in the eye, and then the light strikes the back of the eye. There's a surface back there called the retina. It's made of cells that are sensitive to light. When light strikes those cells, they generate electrical signals. Well, those electrical signals are carried down these axons here to a brain region called the thalamus. Now, in reality, the thalamus is deep inside the brain. There's two of them, a left and a right, but I've pulled it out here so we can see the wiring. Now, you'll notice there's a synapse here in the thalamus, right? So there's a little terminal there. The cell body, that's the target cell. Chemicals would be released at that synapse, and the chemicals would activate the target cell. So now electrical signals are racing down this nerve to the back of the brain. So the reason why the back of the brain is processing vision is because it's hooked up to our eyes. So light striking the eyes, that light hitting the eyes is converted into electrical signals that are then sent to the back of the brain, where further processing will happen. And our visual system is going to analyze that information and construct what it is ultimately that we see. Take a look at the ear here, same principle. We have nerves in the ear that are going to be responding to pressure differences, so vibrations in the air, and then those electrical signals will race to the thalamus, from thalamus up to this part of the brain, and we're going to have an experience of hearing something. The surface of the skin has sensory cells that respond to pressure and temperature and pain and so on, different systems there. But whenever you touch something or something touches your skin, electrical signals race up to the thalamus, synapse, more electrical signals race up to this part of the brain, and we'll have some kind of experience of a sensation on our skin. So now we see these three sensory systems here are sensory systems because they're hooked up to the respective sensory organ. Now, these sensory organs are all doing the same type of thing. They share something in common. They're taking some stimulus in the world and converting it into electrical signals. Electrical signals, you might think of, that's sort of the language of brain activity, electrical signals. And what's more, for each of these sensory systems, the nature of the electrical signals is carrying information about the world. And so, for example, if there's a light touch on my finger, then the electrical signals racing down this axon will be of a low frequency. In other words, a few electrical signals per second. But if the intensity of the touch increases, if it's a strong pressure, then the frequency of electrical signals increases as well. So in this way, then the cell can adjust its output signals in accordance with the intensity of the input stimulus. And that's one way then where the electrical signals can represent some aspect of the world. A light touch, you get low frequency electrical signals. A strong touch, high frequency electrical signals. Same with sound. Soft sound, low frequency electrical signals. Loud sound, high frequency electrical signals. Same with light. Dim light, low frequency electrical signals. Bright light, high frequency electrical signals. So in this way then the brain can begin to construct qualities of the outside world based on the nature of the electrical signals that it's detecting from our sensory organs. All right, in this slide it just sort of summarizes what we were just discussing. I wanted to take a moment here to share a little bit about how fast some of these processes are happening in the brain, how fast information can flow through the brain. So here we see again the left hemisphere, and here's the eye, and here's the person's hand, and they're going to be doing some kind of behavior here. They're going to be pressing either a green button or an orange button depending on what they see. So maybe they're looking at a computer screen And if an insect flashes on, they press the green one. If a flower flashes on the screen, they press the yellow one or orange one or whatever that is. So that's the scenario. Now what they're showing in this diagram is how long it takes information to be flowing through the brain so as to generate behavior. So here we go. The visual signal comes in from the computer screen, 35 milliseconds. The time it takes the visual information to get to the lateral geniculate nucleus. Now that's the thalamus that we saw here, right? So it is deep in the brain. It is not the visual cortex back here, but it's that relay station. Well, it takes 45 milliseconds to get there. It takes 55 milliseconds to get back to the visual area. They call it V1 here, right? So in our diagram, it would be 55 milliseconds to get to here. Now there's further processing of the visual information down here in this lower pathway. Remember, in our other brain, that was the recognition area there. That's visual recognition, right? So the person's brain is going to be recognizing what the image was. Was it an insect or was it a flower? And information continues to flow to the more the anterior part of the temporal lobe here, and then up to the frontal lobe, and then look, information gets sent to the motor areas, right, because the person's going to have to respond, and that's 210 milliseconds from the time that the person saw the image. The information flows through the brain like this, 210 milliseconds. The cells up here are going to activate muscles, and ultimately 250 milliseconds later the person can press a button. So a quarter of a second. So a millisecond is 1/1000th of a second. So 250 milliseconds is a quarter of a second. So by the time you see the image to when you press the button in response, a quarter of a second. So that's pretty fast information flow, and that's because the electrical signals travel quickly down these axons. So a lot is going on, and we can think of it as a flow of information. Visual information is being analyzed, objects are being recognized, the decision systems are going to now say, yes, go ahead and press the button, and now the actual control of the musculature is going to run the hands, and the hand will push the button. Quarter of a second for that to happen.